apologize for being absent for 2 weeks in a row. I might have lost all my students if I had any in the first place. But most of you might know that I had COVID, and Clint did too. And so we've been isolating, and thank the Lord, I'm much better. I still sound a little bit stuffy in the head, but I haven't had a fever for more than a week now, so I know that I'm not contagious to anybody, so now it's just a matter of getting over it. But that's a terrible thing. Don't get it. If you haven't had it yet, don't think it's mild. They might call it the mild form, but it's not mild, because we had the vaccinations and everything, and we still had time with it. So try to avoid it if you can. So I've debated, whether we would jump forward in the book to try to not be so far behind, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to muster on, as they say, and keep going with where we were, because we're not on the right week anyway, so we'll get it to work out eventually. So this week we're going to talk again about King Solomon. We talked about King Solomon last time around, about him dedicating the temple and getting ready to do that and all of that, and that God had appeared to him when he became the king and said, what do you want me to give you, and that sort of thing. So I'm going to read a little bit in chapter 9 of 1 Kings. So we're in 1 Kings, and chapter 9 is not really in your student book, but I think it's relevant to King Solomon and the situation of the lesson today. So I'm going to start reading from verse 1 and read about 9 verses there. Now it came about when Solomon had finished building the house of the Lord and the king's house, and all that Solomon desired to do, that the Lord appeared to Solomon a second time, as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. The Lord said to him, I have heard your prayer and your supplication, which you have made before me. I have consecrated this house which you have built by putting my name there forever, and my eyes and my heart will be there perpetually. As for you, if you will walk before me as your father David walked, in integrity of heart and uprightness, doing according to all that I have commanded you, and will keep my statutes and my ordinances, then I will establish the throne of your kingdom over Israel forever, just as I promised to your father David, saying, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. But if you or your sons indeed turn away from following me and do not keep my commandments and my statutes, which I have set before you, and go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land which I have given them, and the house which I have consecrated for my name I will cast out of my sight. So Israel will become a proverb and a byword among all peoples. And this house will become a heap of ruins. Everyone who passes by will be astonished and hiss and say, why has the Lord done thus to this land and to this house? And they will say, because they forsook the Lord their God, who brought their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and adopted other gods and worshipped them and served them. Therefore the Lord has brought all this adversity on them. So this is the second time then that God appeared to Solomon. And in this case, he says, I'm putting my blessing on the temple that you've built and your house and the things you've done. But if you don't follow me like your father David did, and if you start to do these other things, such as, taking on other gods or whatever, then I will make this house a house of ruins and a heap of ruins, and the kingdom of Israel will become a byword, or in other words, it's something that somebody talks down about. And so it was almost a prediction of the future that God said that, because in fact Solomon was not going to be able to live up to the greatness that he had attained. And so we're going to see that today in our lesson. In chapter 10, the Queen of Sheba comes to visit King Solomon because she had heard how great he was and all the great things that he had done. And so she came to visit him and brought gifts, and he gave her gifts. And you can read all about that in chapter 10, about how wealthy King Solomon was and how many things he had accumulated, how much gold, how much silver, how many horses, and just all kinds of things that it lists there that King Solomon had. I mean, he was incredibly wealthy and incredibly wise, and his kingdom was just magnificent. But then we get to chapter 11. So all of those things, were just, you might say, perfect for King Solomon. But that just wasn't enough. He accumulated, but he couldn't stop there. He had to accumulate more, and we'll see that. So let's read the first 3 verses of chapter 11 now. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel, "You shall not associate with them, nor shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods." Solomon held fast to these in love. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. So, just as God had sort of warned about, I guess you might say, King Solomon wasn't satisfied with the wife that God had given him. He had to take other wives, and not just a couple, but hundreds of wives that, and also concubines that he brought into his kingdom. So he had a harem, really, I guess you might say. And sure enough, as God had said, these women began to turn his heart away from the God that he served. They began to present their version of God, I guess, and their belief systems and their rituals and all of those pagan beliefs that they had brought with them into the kingdom. And he began to accommodate them, I guess you might say. He compromised. And when we begin to do that, when we begin to compromise on some things, then it's a slippery slope, because it's people that are, we've talked about it recently, Clint and I have, people that are doing wrong, they're not satisfied to just do wrong on their own. They want you to be involved in them doing wrong. They want you to say that the wrong they are doing is right, and so on and so forth. And that's the way it works. And so whether these women knew they were doing wrong by having pagan religion, Solomon had to have known they were doing wrong, because he was the wisest man that ever lived. So he had to know that this was not what God's plan was for his kingdom. And yet, they turned his heart away towards their gods. And so then we go to verses 4 to 6. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away after other gods, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the detestable idol of the Ammonites. Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not follow the Lord fully as David his father had done. Now David his father, had done wrong in the whole issue of Bathsheba and her husband, and he sent him to the front lines, and he was killed and all that. Certainly that was not right. But, overall, David's heart was right with God throughout his life. Though he stumbled and fell, his heart was right throughout his life. But now Solomon seems to be sort of wholeheartedly turning and doing evil in the sight of the Lord according to this. And it mentions a couple of the gods or goddesses that he was getting involved with then. Ashtoreth is a goddess that was associated with the worship of Baal. And we've heard of Baal a lot of times. And so that was those pagan rituals, I guess you might say. And then, as it says here, Milcom, another word for that is Molech. I couldn't remember it. Molech, and we've heard of Molech in other places in the Bible. And particularly Molech was the one that I always think of because they were the ones that were so involved in sacrificing children to Molech. That was one of the things they did. And now, I don't know if Solomon was involved in that, the child sacrifices, but he definitely was, allowing these things to happen within the kingdom. Okay, let's go on then to verses 7 and 8. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable idol of Moab, on the mountain which is east of Jerusalem, and for Molech, the detestable idol of the sons of Ammon. Thus also he did for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods. So now he's not only, looked the other way, it's more than that. He's actually, set up idols for them so that they could go there and worship their idols in the way that they had done in the past, and sacrifice to their gods, which are not gods. You realize that, what they call gods. I'm not, some people might say, well, they were nothing but pieces of wood and stone, and it's possible. But also, I think there were evil spirits, satanic ingredients in the mix there too, because for people to go and sacrifice a baby, in particularly, or a child, I mean, your mind has been taken over by something for you to do that. That's not to me, that's not a natural act to think that you would do something like that. So all of this was going on then in the kingdom. And now, as expected, let's read in verses 9 and 10. Now the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice and had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods. But he did not observe what the Lord had commanded. So, obviously, if the Lord appeared to you, I mean, and of course we have the scripture, and we know what God says is supposed to be happening. We know how we're supposed to live according to the scriptures. Solomon didn't have the written Bible, that he could pull out and read, but God appeared to him twice and told him, what he should be doing. And so it makes sense that God was angry with him then, because he was not doing what God had commanded him about this very thing, the worship of other idols. So, God can see down the road. He knows what's coming. And it's not that he condones it, but he warns us at times. He can see and know which direction we're headed. Just like if you have a wayward child, a teenager, a young teenager, they're 13, you begin to see them doing, getting involved in a little of this and a little of that and seeming to be attracted to this or that, and then you as a parent, you might say, you're going down the wrong path. You're making choices that are not good. And you're warning them, that they should not do that. And of course, God knows us way better than that, way better than we as parents. And so God was giving Solomon a warning that I see it in you, that you could go down this path and I don't want you to. But Solomon turned around and did it anyway. Okay, now in verses 11 to 13. So the Lord said to Solomon, because you have done this, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you, and will give it to your servant. Nevertheless, I will not do it in your days for the sake of your father David, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear away all the kingdom, but I will give one tribe to your son for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. So, God was angry enough to really destroy everything, and there's times in the Bible where God was that angry about things. And he says, I'm going to take the kingdom away from you, Solomon. Your bloodline is not going to continue with many kings in the throne that came from the family of David and Solomon in that way. But he was going to give the one tribe to Solomon's son, and that is the tribe of Judah. And we see that, in the future as we go along, we'll see it, that Judah, the tribe of Judah was split off from the rest of the kingdom at a certain point. And the rest of the kingdom then went to and was ruled by Jeroboam, who was a commander, soldier, servant under King Solomon. So, this is what God made reference to when he said, your servant will take your kingdom. And so, what can we learn from this lesson? I think, it's pretty clear that when God has spoken, we need to listen and obey. We don't need to compromise. We don't need to say, oh, well, yeah, the Bible says that, but that was for that time, and it's not for us now, and things like that. I mean, we do that sometimes. We compromise our beliefs, and as we do that, then it becomes more and more and more, into the church. When I was a girl, even that short amount of time ago, because, in my lifetime, which I'm old now, but still, in my lifetime, when I was a girl, my grandmother was very set against any work being done on Sundays. She wouldn't sew on Sunday. She liked to sew. She wouldn't sew on Sunday. She didn't want anybody to go fishing on Sunday or anything like that. Sunday was supposed to be the Lord's day, dedicated to the Lord. And we don't have that anymore, do we? We do other things on Sunday. We might dedicate the time that we're at church and say that's dedicated to the Lord. And I'm as guilty of this as anybody else. I realize that I am, because as in real estate, it's that way. People call you every day at all hours of the day and night, and I've tried to dedicate the Sunday morning time as a time that I will not do real estate. And, so far so good. I've managed to maintain that, and I don't. Somebody asked me, I'm sorry, I'd love to help you, but I cannot do that, on Sunday morning. But I might go out and show a house on Sunday afternoon. I don't often do that, but it happens. And, that's a thing that I try to avoid, because I realize I need to have the thought process of dedicating the day to the Lord, and not just the 3 or 4 hours in the morning where I've done some church-related things, but the whole day needs to be dedicated to the Lord. And, of course, the Bible does not say from 8 to 4:30 on a Sunday, you should do these things. I mean, it's not that specific, but we need to have that mindset of thinking about the things that we do and how we do them. Because when we compromise, then we begin to be familiar with that compromise, and then it begins to be a natural thing to do. We've accepted it. It has become a part of what we do. And then another compromise will come along, and we'll go right along with that, because the devil, if he cannot, he can't just get us to maybe leave the church entirely. So what he'll try to do is just chip away at us, chip away at our witness, chip away at us on the things that we choose to do that are just a little bit wrong. Or, just, you probably shouldn't have done that, but oh well, that kind of thing. He's going to chip away at us as much as he possibly can. And we as Christians, need to think along those lines. I think, especially in these days, in our country, in our nation, and around the world as we see things happening. So, our lesson next week is going to go over into chapter 12. And so if you want to, study ahead in chapter 12, you'll be ready for the next lesson. And I look forward to seeing you then.